everybody. Welcome to Two Out the First. It is October the 2nd. Great to have you here. We are live at French Lick Resort in French Lick, Indiana, site of the Korn Ferry Tour Championship presented by United Leasing and Finance. As you might be able to tell, we are not looking at the golf course behind me, and there's a good reason for that. That's because they're having the Pro-Am right now, the Wednesday Pro-Am on the Die course, and they are playing music all throughout the property. It's an awesome atmosphere, but it also wouldn't let you hear me whatsoever, which may or may not be a bad thing. But that's why we're inside here. We're actually in the mansion, which is the clubhouse for the Die course. And this is the mansion on which this is kind of the property was set out when Pete Dye designed this place about 16 years ago and did an incredible job creating this place. But the mansion still stands as the clubhouse. You can actually rent rooms in the mansion, and you can also stay in the mansion for the right amount of money. So it's a beautiful view from the top of the property out throughout everything you see into the valley of southern Indiana. It's beautiful. Tomorrow we're going to, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we can do shows outside with a view of the golf course. But today with the Pro-Am music playing, we're just not going to do that. So rundown for today's show. Very excited about everything we've got to talk about. I do want to talk about, obviously, the Korn Ferry Tour Championship, because that's why we're here this week. And I do want to talk about a cool couple of conversations I had yesterday. Then we're going to talk a little bit about some potential big changes coming to what it means to be a PGA Tour member. We'll give a shout out to Ryan French and Monday Q Info for that reporting. And then want to talk a little bit about the Dunhill Links Championship, which is the DP World Tour event this week. We'll talk about that as well. But first, let's start with the Korn Ferry Tour Championship. If you've been watching the Road to French Lick, our now 11 episode series on the Korn Ferry Tour season so far, you know we've reached the end of the season this week. 75 players are in the field this week. They're playing the Die course, which will be about 76 to 7,700 yards for the Korn Ferry Tour setup. It actually tips out at more like 8,100 yards, which is amazing because there's not enough elevation here to really offset some of that yardage. You play a little above ground here, but not so drastically that you get a 2, 3, 4, 5% discount on distance. So they bumped it up a little bit. They shortened some of the back tees. There's a 300-yard par 3 on this golf course. They're not going to play it at 300 yards, so you kind of cut off some there. But by contrast, the first tee box, the first opening tee shot at this golf course is scary because it's a 500-yard par 4 down the hill to a narrow fairway with stuff on the left you do not want to be in, including water. And there are a lot of those kind of intimidating tee shots on this golf course. So what you're going to see over the course of the next 4 days is there's going to be so much just pure intimidation. That's what Pete Dye did best. It is at the highest level of intimidation here. There's so many shots that just look borderline impossible, and maybe some of them actually are. So this scoring this week is going to be very different than you might be accustomed to seeing when you watch Korn Ferry Tour events on TV most of the year. You saw it kind of change a little bit at the Nationwide Children's Hospital Championship out in Columbus, Ohio. That's because they do try to set up the Scarlet course out there to be a little bit tougher. It's an Alistair McKenzie, so they try to kind of showcase that a little bit in the setup. This is going to be similar. Tough pins, tough course. If any kind of wind blows, you might be lucky to get in the single digits under par that wins this thing. It doesn't look like that's going to be the forecast, though. The weather looks incredible. It's supposed to be 75, 76 degrees pretty much every day and sunny, so it should be pretty awesome. It's going to be a great week. So that all said, I had a great conversation last night with Carter Jenkins, who's the number 37 player in the rankings. So he's 37th in the points list, and the top 30 get their PGA Tour cards at the end of this week. We know about 20 of them. Mathematically, it's really like 24 of them are going to get a card. But there is a scenario where if everything goes crazy, you could have a good amount of turnover. But Carter is 37th in the ranking, just finished joint runner-up in Columbus to really improve his ranking on the year. And just kind of happened to sit next to him last night. We were at one of the restaurants in the French Lick Resort called Power Plant and chatting with friends. And he came over and had a drink, and we were just talking for a while. And while I won't go into everything that we talked about, I just tried to pick his brain for as long as he would let me. And he was awesome. He was incredible, a ton of candor. But as someone who's done this for a number of years now, has gotten close. He got close here last year. He's going to get close here again this year. He may or may not get a card at the end of this week, but he's got to finish something like 5th place or better to be able to get a card. So there's a lot on the line for him this week. And just the honesty that he showed in giving answers to my questions, where I'm trying to kind of learn a little bit more about the psychology of a professional golfer. I'm never going to be good enough to be a professional golfer. That long since went away. And I could be a pretty good golfer, but there's a very different measure between being a great competitive golfer and a great just day-to-day golfer. It's a different game. And what Carter talked about at this level, going from being someone who got out of college, who was an elite amateur player, and then goes, and he's from North Carolina, went to UNC, and then goes and tries to be a professional. What the biggest difference is trying to learn how to be a professional golfer. And time again came up to me, or in our conversation, pointing to his brain, talking about knowing how to do stuff that you didn't innately learn by learning to play golf, right? You got to learn how to travel. You got to learn how to handle being a professional. You got to learn how to take time away from the job. You can't be so obsessed with playing golf that you hurt yourself by being absent from other parts of your life, that you have to take time for yourself, that you have to be efficient with your time, really efficient with your time, because with the amount of transportation that you need, with the amount of golf that you play, and you have to play a lot of golf to get a PGA Tour card. So there's a lot on the line. You're not used to in college playing 27 events, 26 events. You're used to playing, 9 in the fall, maybe 9 in the spring, or whatever that mixture is. Call it a day. They're 1 and 2 day things. The transportation's taken care of, like all of this stuff that I think we would probably take for granted if we were in college and played, at that level. Now you got to manage it yourself. And he was really interesting because we were talking, again, kind of focuses on, it's not the capability, right? It's not having the physical capacity to play the game. And you can be a long hitter, you can be a shorter hitter. You got to be longer these days, but you can be a shorter hitter on that spectrum and still be successful. But the difference really comes down to how you handle yourself shot to shot, how you handle thinking about a tournament as it's happening, how you handle thinking about recovering from bad shots. And the one thing that I thought was most fascinating is that he said the thing that gets him most upset is when he hits shots that are based on mistakes that he makes pre-shot. Not that the shot that he hit would have been wrong or could have been wrong, but his process was wrong. He made a mistake because he either didn't put enough into the shot, or he picked the wrong shot shape, or whatever that kind of mistake is that's preventable before you hit the ball. And I thought that was fascinating because I said, well, what percentage of the shots that you hit, let's say you hit 270 shots in a week, right? You had a good week. What percentage of those are shots that you think you did something wrong? You failed yourself. And he said probably 15% of them. But at this level, 15% of 270 shots adds up over 4 rounds, right? That's 13, 14 shots. So there are lots of shots that you hit where you go, I just let myself down. Now you got to recover from that. And that's 3-4 rounds where you have to just kind of put it behind you and figure out how to get yourself out of a mess that you've created. And his goal is to always try to minimize those and then take your talents as far as you can take it. And that the difference between being a successful golfer out here is not that, the talent level is immense. It's incredible. And it can be intimidating because you see named players, you see people for what they've accomplished at whatever level. But the difference is how you marry your skill, your physical skill, with your mental ability inside the ropes and outside the ropes. And that's what gets you a card. That's what gets you to the next level. That's the examination that is the entire year of the Korn Ferry Tour. So it was great to talk to Carter. Great guy. Really, really enjoyed his company. And hopefully he does exactly what he set out to do this week. Gets his PGA Tour card, gets a chance to go up to the PGA Tour level, where it kind of sounds like he would be more comfortable playing that style of golf versus the week-to-week on the Korn Ferry Tour, where 24, 25 under is a winning score. It's a different kind of game at the PGA Tour level than it is at this level. All right. Let's talk about our second topic today. This is a story from Ryan French over at MondayQinfo.com. You should subscribe over there if you can, if you're able to support him. It's a great annual membership, and he does some tremendous independent golf journalism and writing. And he wrote a story last night that is, at least in terms of voice, is very much like what I have heard and seen in public reporting from Adam Schupak earlier in the year. I think more in like the March timeframe, and now it's kind of getting to a head where there's going to be a vote on this sooner than later. It sounds like, but you can expect to see a very different PGA Tour membership in 2026, is what it sounds like from Ryan's reporting, and again building off of what Adam has said and what I've heard. It sounds like there's going to be a move to reduce the number of full-time, like the fully exempt players currently on the PGA Tour is 125. It's been 125 my entire life, basically. The all-exempt PGA Tour has been around almost my entire lifetime. I think it goes back to 1983. I was born in 83. So I'm pretty sure it is exactly the same amount of time. It might be 84. But that number established at the time was the top 125 players. And I don't know how they got to that number back then. I've never asked that question. But it's been 125 forever, even since they have changed this notion of playoffs from the top 125 getting in to the top 70. Well, now those 70 players definitely have rights and benefits that come with it, and then the 50 and the 30, of course. But you still have this FedEx vault to determine the top 125. Well, what sounds like is about to happen starting in 26. You can't do it for next year. It's just not going to work out in terms of a variety of things. But it sounds like from Ryan's reporting that the move will be from the top 125 players being all exempt to the top 100 players being exempt. So you're going to take 25 cards, 25 people out of that all exempt category, getting into all the regular events, getting into maybe a couple of signature events if you're lucky, or at least having the opportunity to do so. And you're going to have 100 players. They're also going to reduce field sizes. And I think this is something that's a long time in coming. They've been experimenting with it in the fall, especially as daylight becomes more of a challenge, going from 156 and 144 down to 132 and 120. Well, you're going to see that more regularly. You're going to see 156 and 144s go away, and you're going to look at more of a 120 player event, maybe 132, but I think you're going to look at more 120s week to week. And you're probably still going to have that cut to the top 65 in ties. So basically more than half the field could get to the weekend if that were to remain the case. Or they could go top 60 in ties and have a cut that way. I think having something a little bit more cutthroat would be interesting. But that's the way this is going. You're going to have fewer all-exempt players. That's also going to have an impact on the Korn Ferry Tour. It sounds like the era of having 30 PGA Tour cards from the top 30 in the point standings here through the Korn Ferry Tour Championship, that may go by the wayside and go back toward 20 of those cards instead of 30, because obviously in terms of a percentage of players who are fully exempt, 30 against 100 is different than 30 against 125. So they're going to try and scale that back, probably in relation. I would imagine that also has some impact potentially on the DP World Tour graduate spots, so to speak. The top 10 they do now, is it going to stay the top 10? Could be top 7, top 5. That could change. Will they continue to do cards through Q School? That didn't work so good this year. So will they continue to do that? Will that continue to be a bone thrown out there through Korn Ferry Tour Q School? That's effectively what it is. We'll see about that. What Ryan lamented about the most over at Monday Q Info was that Monday qualifying spots may be reduced from 4 to 2. And if that's the case, obviously he would be bummed. He cares about those stories and does a great job reporting them. But it is more similar to the Monday qualifying situation on the LPGA Tour, where almost all of those are 2 spotters, not 4 spotters. Now, part of that is they get fewer players, right? They don't have quite as many players in LPGA Mondays as you would in most PGA Tour Monday qualifiers. They have more like 40, 50 players, as opposed to some Monday qualifying events have 80, 90, 100 players. And as the year goes on, it kind of dwindles down a little bit. But you have more of those players. And something Ryan pointed out, I thought was very poignant as well, is that PGA sections that run these Monday qualifiers, they take in a lot of money by running these Monday qualifiers. And the sections kind of spread it out a little, or spread out that host over the course of the year. But they make money from running those tournaments because they collect the fees and they operate the event. Well, if you have less participation because there are fewer spots available, then maybe that impacts the bottom line of some of those PGA sections around the country. So there's something to that as well. What I find fascinating about all of this is that this is something I think is a good thing. I'm not knocking this. I think there needs to be fewer exempt players on the PGA Tour, not because I want fewer people playing, but because I think there should be more movement up and down from year to year. And it is extremely difficult to move down once you kind of reach a certain level, because there are so many kind of catch-all categories, exemption categories that can help a struggling player, whether it's currently the 126 through 150 player. They don't have a full status, but they get into a lot of events. They get a pretty good schedule out of it. That category would now be 101 to 125 is what it sounds like. It sounds like they may be wanting to get rid of the past champion category, which is really like the filler box for events that are Oppo events or the regular season events that maybe just don't get the same kind of field as the others. And they go reach super far down into the exemption categories and they go, hey, you were a winner 15 years ago of this event. You can come back and play. And it's their first start of the year or whatever. It sounds like they're going to get rid of that. And then they're going to try to change the medical extension category and really revise that, which actually I think is something they should have done a long time ago, because there are some players who have gamed that system over the years to try to milk out the number of starts and how they spread it out to get their exemption cleared and see if they can find a way to just catch lightning in bottle for 1 week and get their PGA Tour status back. So I think those things, that is all good stuff, right? I'm not knocking any of this. I think this is the right call. I understand why Ryan, from his content perspective and just from where his heart is about golf, that he laments losing potentially a couple of Monday qualifier spots. But statistically speaking, something like 30% of Monday qualifiers make the cut in the event that they qualify for that week. So for as awesome as the occasional story like a Corey Connors, who was the last guy to win as a Monday qualifier 6 years ago in Valero, for as rare as those happen, but they're awesome stories, but they're rare, exceptionally rare. Someone who Monday qualifies finishing in the top 10 and getting to the next event, exceptionally rare. That's why the top 10 exemption exists. If you're not a full-time member, you get the top 10, you get to the next event. It's because it doesn't happen that often. It's a nice to have kind of thing because you can continue a great story. It's not because it's expected to happen. So the reality is, if you're going to invest the time and money into having these signature events, which are really the drivers, right? They see those as the drivers of the schedule between those signature events, the playoffs, and the majors. That is your A-plus player schedule, right? That's what you want to play. All the other stuff kind of has a different appeal to it now, right? We're looking at a fall schedule where you have lower purses compared to prior years, right? Purses don't generally go down on this tour. So that means there's a big change happening there in how that's perceived. The change is happening in terms of how many players get their full card instead of 125 going to 100. So there's kind of been a realization that, and maybe there's been some more vocal insight from the marketplace, from not only fans, but also sponsors saying, look, I mean, it's cool that we have 156 player fields, but how many people in that field are a draw? And I think if we're just being honest with ourselves, it's 30 players or less in every field. And then you can become a star, you become a better player, and all of those things are great. But if you're not one of those 30 that's a draw currently, then you should be happy to be in the field. You should be happy to have access to the potential to win that money. I think what has to come with that, if you reduce the number of cards down to 100 from 125, then I think you need to be able to put some money into the Korn Ferry Tour. You need to increase purses. Instead of $1 million guaranteed, make them $2 million guaranteed. For the finals series, instead of $1.5 million, make them $3 million. Make it equal to what you see with the DP World Tour. If you want to treat it that way as the path to the PGA Tour and make that path a little bit harder, then you need to compensate the players, I think, that are now going to kind of be cast aside in terms of fewer spots available through the Korn Ferry Tour points list and also just fewer PGA Tour cards. You're going to have a little bit more competition down the Korn Ferry Tour level, trying to get back to the PGA Tour, trying to get better status on the PGA Tour. So if we're going to do that, I'd love to see that investment in the Korn Ferry Tour. And I'm sure a lot of people that are in this building right now or out on this golf course would love to see that as well. More TV time, more exposure, all of those things would be good. But you've got to kind of back it and you've got to say it's important and you've got to show that in what you do. You can't just say, okay, well, we've got a schedule. We bump the purse up a couple $100,000 and then we don't put it on TV. We don't really sell against it. You've got to put the effort in, especially if you're going to try to create this new way of thinking about getting to an all-exempt PGA Tour with fewer all-exempt players. All right, last topic of the day. One quick shout out before we get to the last topic. I want to give a shout out to every player competing in the Epson Tour Championship this weekend. They have their event at Mission Hills. It is their season finale as well. We were hoping to be able to go out there, but they're on the same week. And obviously we've been doing the Korn Ferry Tour show all season long, the Road to French Lick. So we had to be here, but 15 lives are going to change for the better out in California over the weekend because there are 15 cards available now through the Epson Tour, which has proven its worth. It continues to prove its worth as a way of getting to the LPGA. And there's been a lot of great investment in the Epson Tour over the last several years. And it's really it's cool to see a season culminate like this. And there are a bunch of players who have, a lot of players actually, who have an opportunity to get a card through that season-ending event. So it could be a life changer for them as well this weekend. So 45 cards on the line between the two biggest men's and women's professional golf tours in the world. This is a cool week, very cool week. All right, last thing I want to talk about, because this is one of my favorite events of the year. The Dunhill Links Championship is on the DP World Tour, and it's now become a political hotbed tournament over the last couple of years. It really goes back to 2022 when LIV started, but especially in 23 and this year. Last year, there were 6 LIV players who competed, and those players competed because the way that tournament works is unique to the DP World Tour. Johan Rupert, who is the head of Dunhill, he has a lot of say over who he can invite to the tournament. They don't have to be DP World Tour members, and he very much wants kind of a kumbaya back in the golf world. He doesn't want the LIV players to be seen quite as pariahs as they are in some cases. So he invited a bunch of LIV players last year. Well, this year there are even more. There are 11 LIV players this year in the tournament. And you got John Rahm and Brooks Koepka are probably your biggest headline players, but you got Patrick Reed and Taylor Gooch and Hudson Swafford and Dean Burmester and Brandon Grace, even though he just got relegated. There are a whole bunch of LIV players in this field this year. And also playing are Jay Monahan, the PGA Tour commissioner, and Yasser Al-Rumayyan, who's the governor of the Saudi Public Investment Fund. They are paired with different players. Jay Monahan's playing with Billy Horschel, and Al-Rumayyan, who went by Andrew Waterman last year, but is Al-Rumayyan this year. He is playing with Dean Burmester, who is another LIV player who had a very good season on their tour. There's kind of this thinking that because they're in the same place at the same time, that there's something to be worked out here, and maybe all of that is true. But what really is kind of a bug in my crawl is that we have turned what should be a really cool tournament. I mean, it is their AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am, but you play the Old Course, Kings Barnes, and Carnoustie, which sounds incredible. We've turned that tournament into a political bellwether of whether there's going to be a deal, of how much they talk to one another. Are the LIV guys welcome? Is John Rahm's appeal to the DP World Tour about the fines, is that settled? There's all these different things that take away from the actual golf. And I realize those are things to talk about. But I would like, and I hope that it works out, that the golf speaks for itself over the course of the next 4 days. It should be a really fun event. It's a great watch on TV if you're on this part of the United States in the eastern half. It's great coffee golf if you get the chance. So take a couple of minutes this weekend and flip it on Golf Channel if you can. All right, that's going to do it for us today on the show. Thanks so much for spending some time with me. Really appreciate it. Again, we'll be back through the rest of the week doing 2 off the first. We usually do this in the opposite way. We do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then kind of take the rest of the week off. We're going to do it the other way this week. I got called to play in a Pro-Am yesterday with about an hour's notice. We had a great time over at the Ross course. There's 3 courses here at French Lick. There's the Die course, the Ross course, which is one of my favorites anywhere, and then the Valley course, which is 9 holes. They got a short course coming. You'll hear a little bit about that on the broadcast this week. That's very exciting as well. This place is an incredible property, but I'm never going to say no to a pro-am, especially on one of my favorite courses. So we had a great day. I was called in to be a ringer, and I think I did my job pretty well. And we'll see if we wind up winning or not. Who cares? But we had a great day. So instead of doing our show usually Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we're going to do it Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and we'll end the week with 30 players getting PGA Tour cards. So very exciting. Thanks so much for listening or watching. Check us out on GNN TV over at golfnewsnet.com. You can watch the live stream 24/7 there. We'll continue to give you updates as we get on more streaming platforms. Free Live Sports should be our first one very soon. And then our updated apps for Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV will allow you to watch the channel live on your TV or any screen you wish, 24/7, all the time. Back tomorrow with another show here from French Lick, Indiana. Thanks so much. Once again, thanks for your comments. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow on 2 of the First.